going back to one of your earlier questions or answers, I should say, where's the onus fall with the university even the coaching staff to ensure that the athlete, there's an atmosphere of accountability and responsibility around that beyond just, hey, I've got my APR bonus, so I really need you to pass that class.
All those APR bonuses is such a con, right? So it's interesting. I think it was Fran Fraschilla I once saw say this, talking about the different jobs that he worked. And he was like, at Manhattan, the priority was to educate players and graduate them. Right. But he was at Manhattan College or Manhattan University, whichever it is. When he got to New Mexico, and what people have to understand is that in New Mexico, University of New Mexico basketball, like that's the team of the state. It was about winning games. You know, like that's the job that he was hired to do, to win games. And so I feel like part of it falls on the coaches, but I also feel like coaches are not academic officers. The schools make the decision about whether or not they care about these players being actual legitimate students. Case in point, Notre Dame, for as long as I live, will never win another national championship in football. They just won't. And the biggest reason is it's really hard to put together a championship football team with 85 guys who can take calculus as freshmen. And they do not bend on you have to take calculus as a freshman. And I respect the hell out of them for that, because they have decided that this is what a Notre Dame student does. And these football players are going to be Notre Dame students. And this is what they have to do. Got it. These other schools are doing this, and we can easily blame it on the coaches, but the coaches are like, yo, I know there's some bullshit. You know there's some bullshit. Let's just come out here and win some games, right? And, you know, and then whenever it happens and it all comes down, like it happened with Bob Huggins at Cincinnati, right? It all shakes out, and we all go blame Bob. And Bob is like, I thought y'all said y'all wanted to win games. I went and got you some dudes who could win some games, right? This is what it is. Nolan Richardson, when his teams did not have the academic performance, they all blamed him. And Nolan was like, these dudes are so much better off from the 4 years that they have with me that using graduation as a metric kind of misses the point of what all of this stuff is, right? As it all gets put together. And so the coaches, like, if you were just obviously disrespecting like the intellectual capacity of your players, then that's one thing. But there are a lot of dudes out here, I do believe, that still legitimately care about the end game for their players. And I do hate the fact that this has evolved to a point where the number one reason the guys get into it is not because they want to work with young people, right? Like if you do a job working with young people, but you don't want to work with young people, then why the hell are you here, man?
What are you doing it for? Right. If you don't want to get the most out of them, invest them and give them the right information, what are you doing it for? Right.
Like Nick Saban, who was a bit of a tyrant when he was with the Dolphins, he's not actually really a tyrant at Alabama. Like he is a dude that actually real life cares about his players. Like this is a thing for him. I remember one of his guys he got busted for something. It may have been a charge of something. It was some level of assault. I can't remember if it was against a woman or not. But he did not put him off the team. And everybody came and asked Saban, well, why did you put him off the team? And his thing was, I'm not putting him off the team to show you guys how tough I am. I'm not putting him off the team to make this point to you. I know this guy. I care about what happens to him.
Right.
So I'm dealing with this in the way that I think is best for him. And I think that a lot of people cynically would look at it and be like, oh, you just wanted that dude to play. Saban got player after player after player. He don't need no one. He don't need no one. No, he was just like, I'm not running him off the team because I need to show you guys that I'm about law and order. I'm not going to do that. That's a man that cares about his players. But you can see the terrible things happen around here are these places where the dudes do not care about their players.
Right. And I remember that because I think that was the same. He basically was saying, if I send him out of this environment, it's going to be worse for him where he's going to go, and I can keep him, and we think we've got a better path for him.
Yes.
Right. And so I did gain a lot of respect for him in that regard, because he did. And it's very rare that coaches of that caliber show that kind of compassion, because usually they align with public sentiment. You need to just crack the whip, come down on him, and see where he ends up. I also think about a time, and this is kind of off subject, but think about Nick Saban. I gained respect for Nick Saban when he was like on 60 Minutes one time. I don't know if you saw this, but he's on 60 Minutes, and they tried to gotcha him. Like, what do you have on the radio? And he said, you really want to know? And it was fucking Michael Jackson playing. I was like, holy shit. Nick Saban listens to Michael Jackson. That threw me off.
Yo, have you seen all the videos of him doing the electric slide at recruits' houses?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, oh shit, Nick Saban does the electric slide. And I was like, do you realize how many of these houses he's been in? Like, I did an interview on the radio once with Lou Holtz. He was on my show. And I got all kinds of historical problems with Lou Holtz that go
Right,
back.
right.
Don't forget, Lou Holtz basically lost his job at Arkansas for doing an ad for Jesse Helms. Like, never forget that, right? Like, Lou Holtz's current political turn is not new. But I'm talking to Lou Holtz. I'm like, hey, Coach, how are you? He's like, what's your name? I said, Bomani. He's like, say the name again. I said, Bomani. Let me hear that one more time. Bomani. Okay. And then we started, and he's in full Lou Holtz mode. Oh, Bomani, it's so great to talk to you. Da, da, da. And I stopped and thought about it, and I was like, the names that Lou Holtz has had to learn on the drop of a dime, 3 syllables and 6 letters, so low. Like, this is a buddy slope. Lou Holtz when it comes time to figure out how to say this dude's name, right? These cats been everywhere, man. They seen all kinds of stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
To circle back, hone in on one thing, because we talked about this a lot with HB, about structural and systemic change, and that's where the focus needs to be on. So what I hear you saying when you're talking about a lot of these coaches actually do the right things by these players is that it is more of the environment created by the university's leadership that allows for these sort of players to fall through the cracks and to get a lesser education than the rest of the people on campus, because there's an expectation of victories, because there's the marketing component of the football team or the basketball team.
Yeah, the problem that I think always shakes out is these dudes are on campus to serve, right? So, like, if you were to ask me, like, before we get to all the money and everything else, like, what's the purpose of having a team on campus? It is to improve school spirit, right? Like, that is the biggest thing about it. Get something that everybody can rally around. It makes the environment better. You know, that's before we get to all the TV deals and everything else. Why do we have these teams? School spirit. Like, that was the really biggest thing. Like, why do you have a high school football team, right? I mean, that makes a little money for some people, but it doesn't really make any money, right? It's, it's for the environment. It's for all of those things. And once we got to college, what these colleges are basically saying is we're letting in dudes that we don't think should be here. And we'll do this because they serve us a purpose and because they make us some money. Well, what about trying to educate them? If they wanted to educate those boys, they'd have been letting them into school already. They're not letting them in for that. They are letting them in order to play these games. And so the coaches, I think it goes 2 ways on them. One way is they don't have to recruit everybody. They can decide to recruit students, like, if that's what they want to do, right? And they can decide to recruit kids that they think can become students, whatever it is, they ultimately can make that call. But when the rubber meets the road, it's the school that's going to make the decisions about what they want their program to be like, and they don't have to tolerate these things if they don't want to. So, like, University of Miami is a fascinating example, of course, right? Because it is a Tony private school that's down there in Coral Gables, except they happen to have the most prime real estate in recruiting and didn't know it, except them boys are nothing like the Miami that's in Coral Gables. And now all of a sudden you got all these dudes, and it's worth noting, these dark-skinned dudes showing up with gold teeth, right? Ain't never been around no white people before, all of this stuff. And then they're down in Miami. But when you go back, especially with those 80s Miami guys, and listen to them talk, dude, them cats are not just smart, but, like, informed, like, clearly. Like, Michael Irvin, for example. Michael Irvin left as a junior, I want to say, and I think he graduated, before he had gotten out of there. All of those dudes, like, you think Alonzo Highsmith sounded like that before he got to Miami? Michael Irvin, you think he sounded like that before he got to Miami? Like, all of those things. But Miami clearly had made a call that on some level, y'all are going to have to do something. I just ain't about to be out here terrorizing us. Breaking into cars and stealing radios. No, dog, it ain't going to be that. So you can decide. But yeah, I went to this school in the South, and I had gone to do a talk, and they took me around, to meet everybody in the athletic department. And I remember this one guy had come in. He was working on his master's. He was there with his kid, talking about his wife. Like, it was clear that he had gotten a lot good out of going to school at this place. And, and they told me that if it weren't, basically, he's one of these guys that if he had not played football, would have never had these opportunities, never would have been in these places. But then the woman I'm talking to takes it aside. She's like, but every now and then we get somebody who can't read. And they got to have a whole different program.
Right.
Like, what do we do for this kid who can't read? Coach he letting the kid in who can't read.
Right.
He knows that. Somebody has told him that this boy can't read. They know that. Somebody's getting that test taken for him so that he can get there. They know this stuff. You don't have to do that, right? Like, that's something that these coaches don't have to do, but they choose to.
So do you think does that hurt or harm kids? Because in some cases, I was a kid who was academically ineligible, but I learned methodology by going to school. Now, I would have never been able to get into college without basketball. Like, it just wasn't my thing. But when I got into school, I wasn't, I guess, a charity case, but I learned methodology. Like I learned how to research. I learned how to communicate, articulate my points. I learned how to be confident, right? Like one thing that athletes aren't is confident in environments outside of athletics. Where is that ultimate? Again, I'm going to always ask about the balance. Like, where do you find the balance?
Question. Yo, that's such a great question. I remember like Penny Hardaway, for example, right? Penny Hardaway was a Prop 48K going to Memphis. It was on the Dean's list once he got there, right? Like there really are so many guys who just need to be in the right situation and to figure some things out and get some personal attention. Like you went to a smaller private school, which is a big deal, like on, on doing that kind of stuff. And so I'm with you. I don't want to get to a point where you're just looking at these guys and saying, if you could not get into insert university here, then you can't get in, right? It would never be that. But I also think that they got to be able to figure out, and I think this gets lost in it, how many guys actually like do want to be better at this, right? Like I think most people, if you were giving them a choice, would you rather not be academically strong? All of them would want to be. And I watched the same thing you talked about, all those athletes who come in and their lack of confidence when they're in a space. Like when Julius Peppers, during the whole UNC debacle, somebody leaked his transcript. And people, of course, laughed at him. And he put out a statement. And he was like, look, man, the way that you would feel on a football field is the way that I feel in a classroom. And people kind of chuckled that off. And I'm like, no, that's very real. Like I had to learn that because, again, my parents are college professors. So to me, I just show up in this world when I realized that the other kids on scholarship were feeling the same way to a degree as these athletes were feeling.
Right.
Man, but there are a lot of dudes that I think that you get them in that place. And if you tell them it's important, they're going to treat it like it's important. Like you had to get eligible to play. Like, okay, cool. Now we got to treat this like it's important. If you treat it like it's important, they'll treat it like it's important. If they succeed and you give positive reinforcement, they will crave that same positive reinforcement because don't nobody want to be stupid. Don't nobody want to be uninformed. Nobody does, right? Like you think about it, no matter where you are. You say people might pick on you for being a nerd, but more people pick on you for being stupid than they pick on you for being a nerd.
Wow. Right. Absolutely. Damn.
Like think about this. If those kids called me a nerd when I was growing up, I just gotta have to take it. If I called them stupid, they punch me in the face.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to be stupid.
Right.
Now, moving away from the college game, something that I always have enjoyed following you on social media, as well as your takes on ESPN and on the Right Time, in terms of the treatment of athletes once they reach the NFL. So now we had a really interesting case with the Carolina Panthers, the move away from Cam Newton and then the doubling down on Christian McCaffrey in terms of sort of the commodification of this talent and the treatment of black athletes. Where do you see us going in that space and trying to change the narrative around these athletes being entire people and in terms of also just being treated better than some people might otherwise think?
Yeah, like we got to get to a way, and I don't exactly know how to do it, but how to get people to figure out like just how fucked up they are in the first place. Right, because that's the first step is for them to recognize that and then take the steps down. And so often they don't realize it. Like I watched the Cam Newton experience for all the time I was in North Carolina. And then from here, it's just always been a fascinating topic for me to watch. And man, no matter how well he did, win the MVP, go to the Super Bowl, all that stuff, we're just waiting for that moment where everybody got to be right about what they said in the first place. And then you wind up getting them out of here. Cam's been out there doing all that charity stuff and everything that you ask your quarterback to do. We talk about guys sounding different than when they showed up. You see the work that he's done on his presentation and recognizing that he was the face of a franchise and everything that was required of that and the actual success that they had as a football team. All of that. They ain't treat him like nothing on the way out. It was just, okay, you got to go. Thanks for the memories, mutual decision, all of this stuff or whatever. And then they gave McCaffrey the contract, which is a contract that running backs generally don't get for all kinds of reasons. And McCaffrey's a good player, all that stuff, yeah. But then what happened is all the football media comes up and says, Matt Rule is showing what kind of player he's going to reward. What, good ones? Right. Okay, he's going to reward the best player on the team. Okay, we got that. Or what are you really trying to say? McCaffrey ain't working no harder than nobody else. He is a naturally gifted athlete with like high caliber athletes all up and down the bloodlines. Grandparents, his father won a Super Bowl as a wide receiver and ran a sub 4.4, by the way. Right? He went out here, just running crossing routes. All of this stuff. And it's just like, yo, why can't you break free from your initial belief that black people are just out here to perform athletically and white people do all this stuff because they're good people and hard workers, and that's how they wind up getting there? Like, you even think about when we talk about Michael Jordan with this documentary and everything, people talk about he's a ruthless, cutthroat competitor, but they don't say, man, that's a really hard worker, right? Like, we skip the hard work part and go straight to the motivation for what the hard work was. But in reality, no matter what moves you, you are a hard worker. That is what gets you here. And people just refuse to acknowledge how hard black people work to get to where they are. Because I'm here to tell you, I am 6'4". I could actually dunk a basketball before I was 6 feet tall. I am black. I ain't a major league nothing.
Right.
Like it ain't in the bones, man. I can't just wake up and all of a sudden go out here to hoop in the NBA.
Right. And it's like you mentioned the Jordan doc, right? So it's that I was taken aback by when we watch Michael Jordan, right? And everybody, like you said, everybody's talking about, oh, he's competitive, he's cutthroat. I heard people talking about, why didn't he look out for Scotty and all these other things, right? But I'm just curious, why is it that athletes, and I mean, maybe I'm asking a question that we already know the answer to, but we have to turn it into what can we pick away from him, right? So it's not that Michael Jordan was a fierce competitor. He really, what I saw Michael Jordan being a damn listener. I didn't know he listened so damn intently. Yeah. That was the one thing that knocked me off my feet about Tim Duncan. I joke with that dude today, like, yo, you should write a book called How to Be Coached. Like, this dude, that's maybe like the secret of some of the greats. Like, I didn't realize Michael Jordan was such an intense listener. There was a piece of that thing where he's staring at Phil Jackson, like Phil Jackson is literally spitting money out of his mouth. He was staring at him so intently. And I'm like, damn, I watched it like 3 or 4 times with my son. I'm like, because look at how intense Michael Jordan is listening, right? Mouth closed, standing at attention, eyes wide, absorbing all the information. Why do we get into this thing? And then with all of the other things that were in this documentary, people pull out of it Jordan versus LeBron. They pull out of it. Like, I'm like, what are y'all watching? What are you looking at? How do you pull all of that? How do you pull that out of what we just saw? And it's the same thing. Like, you see Cam Newton, and Cam is feeding homeless people after every Sunday game. He's doing sponsoring all types of kids, and you pull out what? This old adage that he's a privileged, not working hard, he's a prima donna. That's a conflict that I'm always sort of finding with way that black athletes are represented in the media, particularly.
You know what's kind of ironic about the stuff with Mike as you talk about the listening thing? And it goes through the doc, but this is just something we all know, which is Jerry Krause did all these things that Michael Jordan hated, right? And what you're going to get a lot of discussion around the document is how much of an asshole is Michael Jordan not, just based upon the way that he dealt with his teammates, right? But one thing I actually really respected about Krause that isn't going to get talked about enough is all those things that he did that Mike did not like. He was right just about every single time. He traded Charles Oakley for Bill Cartwright. Right. He was right. He fired Doug Collins and brought in Phil Jackson. He was right. Like, we got all these different things that we can point to, where Jerry Krause was right. He was the one guy who stood up to Michael Jordan. Now, he took a lot of hell for it, but in the end, Mike knows, yeah, you're right. Those are the moves to make. Meanwhile, you got all these dudes who played with Mike who's scared to say anything back to him. Right. And I was like, but no. It's been demonstrated. Mike wants you to stand up to him. Right. Like, Mike is that kind of guy where he wants you to push. Like, he's going to push. You're supposed to push back. This is the way it goes. And you're right. So a cat like that, people don't realize that, like, no, he's doing all this listening. Right? I think that comes from, like, having the father that he had and then going to Dean Smith, the most widely respected man on the planet Earth. Right? And so he goes and listens to him. But none of these coaches, even like Mike would disregard sometimes what the coaches had to say. But if you had something worth hearing, Mike gonna listen.
Well, listen, right.
And you're right. He does not. That is something. Dean Smith gets the credit for Mike listening, not Mike.
Exactly, not Mike. Right.
I hadn't really thought about that till you said it, but you're absolutely correct. Dean Smith gets the credit for getting Mike to listen, as opposed to Mike being willing to listen. Because if I was Mike, I wouldn't be listening
to nobody. Right. I had an experience with Tim in San Antonio like that, and we're in this drill. And it's like a 5-on-5 drill. And we had gone, like, Pop does things in sections. So he'll, like, give you a piece and then you play. So he gives us a piece like, you're supposed to be right here. If you're here, you get the pass, you go finish. Tim is like not where he's supposed to be, doesn't finish, and there's a ball boy on the baseline who says something under his breath. And Tim is like, "What did you say?" And the rest of us are like, "Hey, man, shut up. What are you doing, man? It's Tim Duncan. We're trying to like," and Tim is like, "No, what did you say?" And the dude is like, "I just said that if you were where Papa told you to be in the spot, you would have caught that cleaner. You'd have been able to finish it easier." And Tim looks at him and says, "You're absolutely right. My bad." And went down the floor. And I was like, "Oh, wow." Because me in New Orleans, where I was the top dog, I would have said, "Man, if you don't get your punk ass out my face, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing out here." But that's something again that I think was lost in those first couple episodes. But again, it speaks to your point of what we decide to pull away from these guys, right? I often with Cam, I often would question, right, this whole thing about him not being protected. I'm like, wait a minute now. If Brady got hit like that, if he kept getting rung up like this, there'd be some, people would say something in the media. There were a few folks speaking up for Cam, but it wasn't this push like Cam doesn't get protected by the referees. But then it goes back to this other point about whether or not he's a black athlete, he should be able to take it, right? Cam's a big, strong, running, physically fit quarterback. He should be able to take the hits, even when he's clearly standing there trying to be a pocket passer and guys are diving into his knees, guys are hitting him above the shoulders. And there's never that. There was never that respect given to him from the organization, and then he's true at the way that they let him go out the door.
They never, at no point did I feel like this league treated him like a superstar quarterback.
Right.
We see superstar quarterbacks. We know what superstar quarterbacks look like, and we know how they are received in the leeway that they get in various ways. Cam never got that at any turn. And that's why it's going to be interesting to see with like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, what's going to happen when they struggle, right? The first time they struggle, then what's going to happen?
Right.
Because you cannot out-achieve racism. It's not an option. You can't play so well that they can't bring your ass right back down here. That ain't how it goes.